Adena Pediatrics and Family Medicine wants families to have fun and stay safe this summer. While it's great to get outside, play, and swim, you need to take precautions to keep children safe. We recommend following these 5 summer safety tips. 1. Don't get overdone in the sun. Serious sunburns can be dangerous.
My name is Dr. Angela Moore. I am a pediatrician in Circleville with Adena Pediatrics. Parents can protect their children from the sun in a lot of ways. It helps if you wear a sunscreen that is SPF 15 to 30. They make the cutest little outfits that children can wear that are UV protective.
Babies should be kept out of the sun or protected with UV-resistant clothing, hats, and baby-approved sunscreen. 2. Strict rules near pools. Children love to play in water. Young children and babies should never be left unattended near water, even for a few seconds.
In today's day and age, when we can be easily distracted by our phones and technology, having someone whose duty it is to keep eyes on the children and eyes on the water can keep everyone safe.
3. Wear helmets. They can save lives. Children should always wear helmets that fit snugly and cover their foreheads while biking, skating, skateboarding, or riding any motorized vehicles. 4. Stay hydrated. Dehydration can cause serious issues.
In the summer, it's really easy to get overheated, get too hot. Water is your best hydration method. No extra calories, no extra sugar. The best thing to keep you from getting overheated or seriously dehydrated.
5. Catch up on wellness. Summer is a great time for your child to get their annual well check.
With the recent pandemic, a lot of preventative care may have been missed or put on hold. Now, with the kids out of school, it's a great time to come in for those well visits, get caught up on vaccines. A well visit is a time when your physician can also fill out any sports physical form in the same visit. At Adena Pediatrics, we also have evening and weekend hours so that parents can bring their children in when they're not at work.
You can stay up to date on immunizations and get fall sports physicals at the same time. This summer, have fun and stay safe. Adena is here to help. Call Adena Pediatrics at 740-779-4300. Talk to your Adena primary care physician or go to adena.org to schedule a visit.
Good afternoon and welcome to this episode of Living Well with Adena. I'm Dr. John Gabus, the Medical Director of Community Partnerships. And we're glad that you're with us. And we're also glad that summer's here. And our topic today is summer safety, especially with kids. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll be sure to answer those. So welcome everybody. And I was getting ready for my summer fun. I got my broad-brimmed hat. I got my sunglasses. I've got my water. I got my bug spray. Am I missing anything?
You are. You're missing something. You're missing sunscreen.
You're right. You're right. So let's talk about sun protection. So with being outside much more, what are the basics of sun protection?
So in that summer safety video, we saw Dr. Moore from Adena Pediatrics talk about how we would like a foundation of an SPF of 15 to 30. It goes up, as everybody knows, to about like 50, 70. And we really want to make sure that kids have that right before they go outside. And we're reapplying every 2 hours while they're playing or after they're done in the pool or sweating or your towel drying afterwards, just making sure that these kids are protected. We also have other ways of protecting them from the sun. We can give them some shade, and they have some great options for clothing that has SPF built into it, which is great. She said they have the cutest little outfits, which is true. I was just at the beach last week and I saw it everywhere, and that was really good to see.
Mm-hmm. And I forgot to introduce our guests today. I was just so caught up in being excited about summer. So we have Dr. Kristen White and Anna Huffman, who's a pediatric nurse practitioner with us. give us a little bit of introduction. Kristen, you go first.
Yeah, so I'm Kristen White. Have been at Adena Pediatrics now for almost a year, which is hard to believe. And I'm from the area. My husband's from Chillicothe. I'm from around Greenfield. And a little shameless plug, I'm moving to Greenfield, our office. I'll be in an outreach office there 4 days a week starting August 16th. So I'm super excited to be back and serving the kids of that community.
Great. Anna, how about you?
That's great. Hi, I'm Anna Huffman. I'm a nurse practitioner that just started with Adena Pediatrics back in April. I grew up in Canal Winchester, which is about 45 minutes northeast of here a little bit, and my husband and I now live in Groveport. So I come down here and I work at the Chillicothe office on Wednesdays and Thursdays until about 7 p.m. So those late office hours, I am there. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to be in Circleville on Tuesdays and Fridays, which will be great. I'm in both offices, so I get the chance to work with a lot of great docs and staff. I went to Ohio State, graduated there in 2020 with my master's in nursing, and I worked at Ohio State in trauma and surgery for about 4 years. So it's a bit of a jump going to pediatrics, but that's where my heart is, that's where my passion is, and I'm so happy to have found this position here at Adena.
Great. And it's great to see your excitement and enthusiasm.
It's apparent.
Yeah, great. Okay, so let's get back to summer safety.
Yeah.
And as we saw in the video, water safety was a very important component. I'd like to start with that because the outcomes of not being water safe can be very drastic and very dramatic. So let's talk about that. When you have a pool or you're near water, what are the things that you should absolutely do?
Yeah. So I'm really big about water safety. I think, we see a lot of that stuff in residency when bad outcomes can happen. So I try to prevent that and talk about it in every wellness visit with summer coming up. I think everyone should learn how to swim. So making it a summer goal is important. And so, but talking about water safety, so we know kids are curious. We know they think they know what they're doing. They're independent. So having someone like Dr. Moore said, if you're around a pool, around water, that have multiple kids in there, that someone's eyes are on the water at all time. I think that's a really great tip. But if kids don't know how to swim, having some sort of flotation device on them, because accidents happen, they throw toys in the pool, they lean over, they, all kinds of stuff. But also if you have a pool at home and you're not outside at the pool, having gates around with high locks that kids cannot get into, or I've also seen on like Amazon, they have water alarms. So getting and investing in one of those, I think, is really important because it just takes 2 seconds of not looking and not seeing them for them to end up in the water.
Right. And that would be so tragic.
Mm-hmm.
The flotation devices also are not, are not substitutes for supervision,
yes,
right?
Yeah, 100% for sure. Yeah. So I totally agree with you there. Like that doesn't give us time to look away from the pool. And like I said, I think everyone learning how to swim is always important so that if something were to happen, they could tread water until you got there or anything like that. So.
Okay, great. The time out in the sun, we've talked about SPF clothing. We've talked about SPF in sunscreen. Let's talk more about time exposure, if that's even a concern. If you have sunscreen on and you have the clothing on, can they be out all day?
Yeah, I think that, we want kids outside. I think, this past year, we've all been a little bit more cooped up in the house. And so we want kids to be outside and kids to be active. I think that one thing with being outside longer in the sun, you worry about dehydration a lot more and also overheating, depending on the heat index, the humidity. This week has been really nice. Not so much of that, which we're not used to. But I know that this weekend coming up, the humidity is supposed to be super high. And so thinking about hydration with drinking enough water, signs of overheating with kids getting really red in the face, getting tired, getting belly aches, their temperature starts to get elevated. So making sure that if those signs start to happen, that you take them out of the heat, give them time to cool off. Also making sure that they're drinking enough water. And so we don't want them drinking pop, juice, Gatorades even. We want them drinking the water because that's the best way to stay hydrated.
Okay, great. Another outdoor activity is skateboarding or scootering or biking.
Hoverboarding.
Hoverboarding,
That too.
right? So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about
Pun intended.
of how do we help our kids and grandkids and neighbors, how do we help them be safe on wheeled toys?
Yeah.
So it's really great. We were looking at a lot of bike safety resources earlier, and we found that not a lot of kids these days are wearing helmets. And I think we were talking about that. It might be a generational thing, but we want to make sure that we encourage parents and actually discuss those things at well visits with the summer safety, water safety. It's all kind of just conglomerated. So making sure that kids are wearing helmets that are well fitted. Sometimes it's easy for us to get them like from an older sibling or from like as a hand-me-down, but it's the best way to protect those kids from a serious head injury. And they're common. I mean, these kids are running around having a great time. It's summer, it's hot. We look forward to riding our bikes to the pool or to a friend's house. Make sure that they're wearing like a well-fitted helmet and, that it's over the forehead and the straps are, pretty firm, but not super uncomfortable. So parents need to make sure that they're doing their due diligence with things like that too.
Of course, and making sure that they're on the sidewalk or
Yes.
on a controlled area,
Yes.
supervised riding with parents.
And I also saw that wearing like bright colored clothing helps too, and that they're wearing closed-toed shoes.
Yeah.
It's easy to get outside in the Crocs or like flip-flops, sandals, but it's a pretty easy way for their feet or toes to get caught or scraped up. So it's safest to have those closed-toed shoes on too.
Okay, so we've talked about sun exposure, we've talked about water safety, we talked about bicycle and other wheeled toy safety. How about kids that are at home and they have more screen time? So this is summer safety. We want them outside. How do we try to limit that screen time for kids during the summertime?
Yeah. I think that the biggest thing is parents just shutting it off. I think, or having like designated time where, we're wanting kids to be on screen time for less than an hour a day, which honestly in today's day and age sounds crazy, but it's true. That includes phone time, tablet time, video game time, TV time. All of that stuff is included into that 1 hour that we'd like them to be out on that and less. And so just having time where like, okay, everything's going off. It's time to go outside, especially in those early morning hours when it's not quite as hot, maybe saving that screen time for the heightened heat index of the day around 2 to 3 p.m. And then having the evening outside as well. For spending outside and not being on the screen time too. But yes, we want these kids outside. We want them off the video games and off the phone. So, yeah.
Okay, so let's shift gears again and talk about visiting relatives. So I know that when our grandkids come to see us at our house, we have the door latches, we have the outlet plugs. But if I'm going to have my kids go with grandma and grandpa and they're not used to having kids, what are some of the things that might happen?
So first off, we want to just start by having the conversation. When you're a parent and you're allowing your kids, or just it's great that the kids are going over to aunts and uncles, grandparents' house, having that conversation that can kind of seem a little uncomfortable at first, like, they raised kids too. So, sometimes it's a little bit of an uncomfortable conversation to have, but doing that, knowing your kids, how curious, how unpredictable they sometimes can be, but yet predictable, knowing that they will get into anything that's there. Especially with the pool safety, we want to make sure those gates are closed. There's barriers to them. And I also was reading that, taking away the temptation of getting into trouble. So we say, like, if there are water toys that are in the pool, remove them from the water so that the kids are not tempted to go near the water.
What a great
or having, the things like the scooters or the bikes that sometimes can be near the pool, removing them so that they are not in the same area to remove that temptation. But keep going.
Yeah. And so like we were also talking about earlier with putting medicines up and also trying to put gates onto the stairs, things like that, especially with younger kids who are just learning to go up the steps and they're super curious and interested. So just it's, kind of going into your house and looking around at what are these kids going to get into that maybe is not safe for them to, like a sweep through your house before they come. But I think Anna is right about like having that conversation before as parents that, hey, these are my concerns, or these are the things I see when I walk in here.
That might not seem so obvious.
Yeah, that might not seem so obvious when your kids have been out of the house for quite some time, that we with small children think about. So
I think the same would hold true if you're going to a vacation property
Oh my gosh,
near
yeah.
the beach. Those are not
Yeah.
necessarily childproof.
yeah.
And maybe taking gates with you or
Yeah.
inquiring of the rental company. Do they have child protection
Yeah.
equipment available for you to borrow?
And I think with that, when we go on vacation, we kind of do that sweep through the house and we put up glass things and things that look like that's going to get broken. So we do that before we kind of settle in. But yeah, I think those are all great ideas.
And I think what grandparent wouldn't want to keep their grandkids safe? So even though it may be an uncomfortable conversation, it's still a very good idea to have that conversation with your mother, your father, your in-laws or so.
Yeah.
Okay. Remember, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box and we'll get to those as you send those in. All right. We're still talking about summer safety. And with us is Dr. Kristen White and Anna Huffman, who's a nurse practitioner with Adena Pediatrics. And we've covered things like water safety, sports, wheeled sports, toys, safety. How about nutrition in the summertime? Is there anything special? One of the things I'm thinking of is the potato salad's been out all day. That's not something that we think of for summer safety very often, especially for kids.
Yeah.
So what are some of the key things that you would think about for food safety?
What comes to mind for me first are hot dogs. We're going to cookouts, we're having bonfires and things like that. So, choking hazards for younger kids, those hot dogs, grapes, blueberries, things that need to be cut up, for kids before they are eaten. And I know my sister's probably going to laugh at me because I'm really big about that. But too, and then going off of that, bonfire safety,
good.
We have a fire pit at our house and we love to have them, but like someone kind of like the water safety, always someone on their eyes of the kids because they like to run around and accidents happen even when you think they're not going to. And just teaching the kids too about like, this is hot, standing so far back, and not touching the sticks or the prongs that you roast the marshmallows on, at the end and just things like that and I think the older that your kids get talking to them, then they become cognizant of it and aware of the situation and hey, I'm not supposed to swim alone. Hey, I'm not supposed to be around the fire too close when mom and dad aren't there. Things like that about having those conversations is important too. So
yeah, the bonfire was a good add there. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we've talked mostly about little kids.
Yeah.
How about those middle kids or the teenagers? Are there ideas that you have to help keep them safe in the summertime? And I think about alcohol use for some people and other risky behaviors. What advice would you give us?
So it's interesting kind of going along with that. We tend to give the older kids or the older siblings, adolescents, a little bit more freedom, especially when most of the time parents are at work in the summertime, and we give them that grace, we give them that trust to be able to make those good decisions that we've raised them on. So sometimes conversations can be missed or signs can be missed that they're not making the best decisions in the summer. So I think having and establishing a relationship with your child to where you have that open and honest communication back and forth, you know who their friends are, you know what their priorities are, you really know what they're doing in the summer. Sometimes at the end of the day, after you've been working for 8-10 hours, it's kind of hard to just kind of relax and have those conversations afterwards. But I think knowing your kid, knowing what's going on in their life, what they're doing during the day, having that communication, whether it's texting or you give them a phone call every couple hours, what they're doing is just really important all throughout the year, not just summer. But
good point.
And I think too, in the summer, especially as kids get older, driving age, they are out and about more during the day, or can be out and about more during the day. So talking to them about driving safety with no texting and driving, especially if they have friends and stuff in the cars, you're talking, you're laughing, making sure that you're not having any distracted driving, and where are they going? What are they doing? All of those things are important to talk about too. And even if you're the passenger, if somebody's texting and driving, you ask them to stop, because that's their life or your life in their hands. So just being, big enough to say, please stop.
Very good.
Yeah.
So with teenagers and middle schoolers, they're going to be involved in organized sports or band or cheerleading. Mm-hmm. What are things that they can do, these kids, through the summer to get ready for that really aggressive physical activity towards the end of the summer?
Go ahead. Oh, so I was just going to say, keeping active all year long, I think, is super important, because we worry about kids who aren't active and then they go into that strenuous exercise. So even just taking a walk in the evening, I think, it doesn't have to be go out and run 5 miles. I'm not going to do that. But, I'm all about like taking a walk as a family, but getting in some sort of exercise every day to get you ready for those conditioning sports and things like that. But also trying to do those things in the early morning or the evening hours so that you're not out in the heat of the day. And especially, not going by yourself and doing those things. We want you with an adult or with a friend somewhere where you're doing some exercise. And 2, with like lifting weights, we find kids are getting injured if they're not being supervised properly because they're trying to do too much all at once. And we want a coach or someone there with you to kind of guide you in how to go about doing those things correctly.
I think it's also important to prepare you for the heat. I mean, we know most fall sports usually start in the summertime, whether that's June, July, August, and a lot of these high school athletes are doing 2 days, whether you're there from like 7 to noon or even past that, when the heat index is getting at its peak. Just preparing yourself, preparing your body for that, so that you're making good food decisions when you do have a break. Or, just choosing foods, choosing vegetables that have a lot of water, good nutritional value to prepare your body to be able to perform at your best, Yes. And, because we have kids coming in and getting busy after practice starts and things rolling out of bed and going. But making sure that they're eating something to keep their blood sugar up too after they've been in the heat and exercising. Mm-hmm. So
we'll get back to the teenagers and exercising. I remembered that we were talking before we went on the air. We were talking about Lyme disease and Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and those were some of the rarer diseases whenever I was a young physician. And now it's increasing in frequency, and we're seeing more tick-borne diseases and higher tick populations. Mm-hmm. So how do we get away from that? And here's my bug spray. Mm-hmm. So what are some guidelines for using bug spray in children?
Yeah, so bug spray, we say over 2 months old is when you can start using bug spray. We do advise it. The only thing that we don't advise is using bug spray and sunscreen when they're combined in one bottle, because you're having to reapply your sunscreen so often, and we're not wanting to reapply bug spray that often. So we say use them separately. But over 2 months old, we want you doing that, using bug spray with DEET in it, because that's what repels the bugs. And it does help against ticks, does help against mosquitoes, all those kind of things. So anywhere from 10 to 30% of DEET is safe, but we always talk about giving them a bath before bedtime to wash it off is important as well. But thinking about too, as you're going out hiking, I feel like hiking is a big thing right now. Buzzards Roost, we have a lot of great hiking spots in Chillicothe and Ross County in general, but wearing long pants, wearing tall socks, long sleeves, wearing a hat as you have like brush and trees and things around you to keep you from getting those bugs. And then doing tick checks at night. It's part of our daily routine at our house. And so especially with girls with long hair, they get in there looking behind the ears, in the ears, between the fingers, all that kind of stuff, checking for those before bed so that you can remove them if you do see one.
And how about pets and being kind of a carrier of ticks?
Yeah, especially as our pets are outside and running around too. So lots of people have dogs and cats.
Okay, let's go back to those teenagers and making sure that they're preparing academically. And I know this is not really safety, but screen time and getting activity helps with decreasing obesity and increasing health. How do you motivate teenagers to get out of the house? Is it okay if they sleep until noon?
I think that's a tough one, because in one point, if they just got done with the school year, you want to give them that grace and that just that reward. They worked hard all year, and maybe in 3 weeks they're starting football or they're starting soccer, and they're going to be doing something 6 hours of the day. So, we don't. I mean, it's hard because we want them to have a good, productive day, but we want them to get their 8 to 10 hours of sleep each night. And if they're going to bed at 2 a.m., then yeah, they're going to sleep until 10 or noon. So establishing that routine in the summertime can also be hard too. But I think just making sure that they are, at their best, just going to bed at 10, 11. If they're in high school and they're able to get that 8, 10 hours of sleep, then that's great. Motivating them with like rewards, more privileges afterwards. If you're up by 9 and you do the dishes and you walk the dog, then yeah, you should be able to go to the pool with your friends or, go ride bikes or something. So preparing them academically, I think, is just keeping that routine going throughout the summer, not necessarily waking up at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. to get ready for that school schedule, but just making sure that they're still productive members of the household and just,
And I think that we find that a lot of kids now with cell phones, they're on their cell phones in bed for hours on hours. So I had a suggestion not a suggestion, but they said what they do in their house from a patient that I've kind of adopted, that I really liked. Their suggestion was having like a charging station that is downstairs, not outside of their room. And that before bed, you put it there and it doesn't come back till the morning, which, I think parents think kids are going to bed, but are they really? It's more of just like constant scrolling, and we get thumb problems later in life. But, taking that phone out of the room, I think can help kids sleep a lot better too.
And that's how it plays into safety, because if they are not well rested and they're driving and they're inexperienced drivers, their judgment may be a little bit impaired.
Yeah, and even that can go into like the social media dangers that we see all the time. Sure. I want to go back to what Dr. White said. When I was getting a phone, 13, 14, I was going to my pediatrician, and she suggested having all of our phones out of the room at like 9:30, 10. And this was 13 years ago, and I was so mad. I remember just being so mad at my mom for listening to Dr. Jenkins growing up, because what did she know? Like, I was a good kid. I should have my phone in my room. And then I think even throughout high school, like I had an alarm clock. There was no reason to have my phone in there after a certain time. And I even now when I have trouble like going to sleep, my first reaction is not to look at my phone, because growing up I didn't have that. So, I self-soothed, as we talked about. I got myself back to sleep without, the stimulation of having a bright light in my face. And it really does help. It helps with like sleep, like good habits, good sleep hygiene. And it's there's nothing but good things that can happen from that.
The best safety is good health, I think. All right, we have some questions from our audience. Are there any brand recommendations for sunscreen and bug spray for children? Any ingredients parents should avoid when deciding what to buy? Yeah,
I think that's a good question. I think as far as like the AAP goes, there's no specific brand that they recommend from sunscreen or bug spray. You can always buy the kids kind, but there's no specific brand. And so we don't want you going out and spending a bunch of money on these really expensive, fad brands, but, Walmart, Target brand, whatever it is fine. As far as the bug spray goes, like I was saying, we just look for that type of DEET that's in it, and percentage wise. But, anytime you add any sort of new product on your kid's skin, you're always looking for some sort of reaction, especially kids who have more sensitive skins. So just be looking out for those things if you try something new. But with both of them, we recommend you washing them off before bed anyways.
I have been seeing that a lot of parents are starting to make their own sunscreen. Ooh. Like I was just on Pinterest the other day and just getting like summer inspiration, and I was reading that parents like have these new ingredients to make homemade sunscreen, and that is not something that we recommend.
I don't think I'd recommend that.
It's not worth the ingredients. It's not worth your time. It might be fun, but definitely go with something that's approved and we know works and we know is regulated by the FDA. So
and the issue is not the sun exposure today, but it will be the sun exposure whenever they're an adult and they've had sun exposure their entire life.
Yeah.
That's whenever the cancer risk really multiplies later.
So, and I think that the statistic is like you spend as a child, like at least 3/4 of your time outside as a kid, like your sun exposure is 3/4 that comes from when you're a child. So, I mean, the risk is now, so we want to protect them now. So
good points. And I think we covered this one, but it made me think of another question. What are some safety tips for around athletes who play outdoor sports in the heat? I think we covered that, like football. But what if the coach says, no, you can't get a drink of water, but you're pretty dry and you've been sweating a good bit? How would you coach your child to coach?
The coach. I have a really hard time with that. You know, growing up, I played soccer all throughout high school, and we would have two-a-days from 7:30 and then stop at 9:30, have a 30-minute lunch break at 10 o'clock, and then we'd go again from 10:30 to 12:30, sometimes 1. And, you know, I think it's prevalent, I think, in more male-dominated sports, I would say, like water is a sign of weakness or something. Even that scene from Remember the Titans where like water is weak or something. But we just want to make sure that we know our bodies, we're preparing ourselves well, eating breakfast, choosing foods that have good water in it, but just knowing the signs that something is not going well with your body. You're overheating, you haven't drank water in an hour, and you've been running, you know, you've been doing suicides all day on the football field. You know, you're getting overheated or you're getting a headache, you feel like your belly's starting to hurt, your cheeks are getting really red. Knowing the signs of that and, you know, expressing the severity of that to your coach, which I hope that's not an issue as much as it may be used to have been.
I was gonna say, I think people are bringing more attention to that, but also most practices have an athletic trainer there, so maybe bringing them into the situation saying, hey, I really need a drink or I'm not feeling well, and they can maybe be a voice of reason, and so bringing somebody else into the situation that has a medical background too, that has those things on the mind as far as what to look for. But also I think just like filling up the tank before practice is so important, like making sure you're already hydrated before, because like you were talking about, you're losing so much water and sweat. But, you know, I think that if that is becoming a regular problem, that'd be something to talk to your parents about after practice of, hey, this, you know, needs to be addressed. But your athletic trainers are there to help you and they have a medical background. So I think that could be an extra set of eyes too.
And I think coaches are much more educated about heat-related injury, and I've not heard of it happening nearly as it used to.
And two, I think knowing what to do if you start to have heat exhaustion, if somebody passes out on the field or something, knowing to put ice packs under the armpits and in the groin is the first way to get their temperature down, and that's your goal. So if somebody's not there to help you, if somebody passes out and that is the concern that they've had heat exhaustion, to try those things, like even like cold water bottles like under the armpits, you know, starting that process before EMS can arrive too.
Okay, all good points. Any tips on teaching kids how to stay safe around animals when visiting others or at fairs?
Yeah. Oh, wow.
You're an old 4-H'er.
I was going to say, yes. So petting zoos, fairs, and all these things are so much fun, but they can also pose risks of zoonotic diseases. So we want to make diseases that come from animals that are spread to humans. So washing your hands, not eating around animals. So they even have signs in the barns now about not bringing food and eating around in the barns. And washing your hands after you've touched them, you're feeding them, they're licking in your hands, because that's usually how things come. Or if you've gotten stool on your hands, if you've been working with your animals, washing your hands before you eat or anything like that is important, because those are risks that we take, but there are, you know, easy ways to prevent those things. So
okay. And that made me think also another, if you're going to your aunt and uncles or your grandparents or cousins and they have pets that aren't used to younger kids.
Yeah, I think establishing just having the conversation with your child, like even though you might have a dog at home that knows how, you know, maybe kind of aggressive you can be, or just like pulling at the tail, pulling at their ears, and how they aren't responding because they've been around you, that doesn't necessarily mean that another dog on the sidewalk or a grandparent's dog is like that. So having that respect for the animal as well, having that conversation that, you need to ask an adult if you're allowed to touch this animal first. Or just making sure that you're establishing those safety.
And two, knowing that if you do have a dog or cat bite, first wash it out with soap and water, but you do need to seek medical care after that happens if it breaks the skin.
Good point.
So that we can help you guys help treat it appropriately.
Good. And one question that's been lingering for me, and it's a sad situation, and that's where children are left in hot cars. And you think, how in the world could that happen?
Yeah.
Well, it happens. And the folks that it happens to are just like you and me.
Yeah.
How do we help remind ourselves on taking that extra special care whenever kids are in car seats and we're just running in for a quick minute? Or how do we prevent those very tragic outcomes in hot cars?
Yeah, so I think that, like you said, there is no running in for a minute. So I would say always take your kids in wherever you're going. And especially as we come out of this pandemic, that is, more welcome now and easier to do, I should say. So doing a sweep of your car every time you get out, looking back to see if there's anybody in the car to try to remember, because too, it's hard when kids are sleeping, they're quiet or anything like that. So
to not want to wake them up to go inside.
But we can talk about like how if a kid is in a car and it's hot outside, that end organ damage starts after about 5 to 10 minutes of being in the car. It's very, very fast of the illness that can start. So we don't ever want to leave them in the car alone in the heat.
Yep. And I've seen cars now that have reminders to check the back seat.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Cool.
So hopefully all of that combined with increased awareness will help.
Yeah.
So I've really enjoyed our conversation. We've covered a lot of territory.
Yeah, we did.
And I know that by us doing this and bringing it to you, that we're going to all have a great summer. So as you're headed to the beach, don't forget your sunglasses, your wide-brimmed hat, your bug spray, and sunscreen that I forgot, and lots of water. So we'll see you again in a couple of weeks for our next episode of Living Well with Adena. Thank you very much.